Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Catherine Andries.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception, and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can also find us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live. We are here in the Heartland, holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Catherine. Welcome, everyone.
And today we are very excited to have Dan Millman joining us. And so he will be joining us after the break.
And Dan is another one of the amazing presenters that's going to be at the Reignite Your Light conference, which is June 21st and 22nd in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. This is a really unique weekend where there's going to be a series of amazing workshops and presenters. Robert Mack, Christian Sinclair, Robin Rose, who is actually the organizer of the event, Joelle St. Germain, Dee Wallace, and the list goes on. So not only are you going to get access to these people and all their gifts and talents, but you will also be part of a transformational weekend, which is really about helping people find out who they are, what are their passions, how to realign with their life purpose, and really transform. And it is possible to do during a weekend event when you are surrounded by a group of people who are so committed to people living their purpose, overcoming their challenges. It really is possible with that group energy. So if you would like to find out more about this, please visit reigniteyourlightevents.com and we might see you there.
Yes, not only will you get to hear all of these fabulous speakers, but you will get to see us in person because we are going to be there at the event in Florida and also be hanging around a little bit after doing a few events. Be sure to stop by and say hi and we will be happy to meet you.
And so speaking about people and, we're talking about, they always say who you surround yourself with is very important because their energy affects your energy. So we do want to talk today about the purpose that we have with people and how people are such a trigger for us to move into our purpose, either overcoming a challenge or urging us to develop some gifts and talents. And so we talk about life purpose a lot on our show because it's so important. And people, I always say, are one of the greatest parts to us coming into our purpose. And I'll explain why I say that. There's two reasons. So the life purpose has two components. It's developing your gifts and talents and sharing them with the world. And it's about learning your lessons. So if we develop all these gifts and talents and we share them with the world, well, if we don't have other people to share those gifts with, we're not going to be able to completely know what it's like to share a gift with somebody. Second of all, it's about overcoming challenges. And so one of the main ways that we overcome our challenge is by friction. And what or who causes the friction? Usually it's other people. And I'm sure you will agree with that. So they always say, that's why they say, the most annoying people can be our greatest teacher because they are the ones that get us going. They get our goat. They cause friction, but it wakes us up and makes us look at some aspect of ourselves. So that is why people are really a crucial part of our life purpose. And also because of karma. We have this need from a karmic standpoint to learn to give ourselves some kind of understanding. Karma means we're out of balance. And so how do we get that balance back? We need to learn the lesson. And so it is with other people that we usually play out our karma.
Karma is one of those things that's often misunderstood, and people often talk about good karma and bad karma. Karma isn't really good or bad. That's really just our perception of the energy that is coming back to us. If you like what's happening, you consider it good karma. If you don't like what's happening, you consider it bad karma. But in reality, karma is really just getting back what you have put out into the world through your thought energy. And so that energy comes back to you. And when you experience it, that's when you're experiencing your karma. So in reality, this has been taught for hundreds of years. And for example, Jesus used the phrase many times, as you sow, so shall you reap. And so that's really talking about the quality of thoughts being planted in the mind, being planted in our lives, and then they grow and mature and bear fruit. And when you harvest them, that's when you are harvesting the experience of those thoughts. And that same concept has been taught in many other cultures using similar images as that. So it's really just learning to understand the cause and effect relationship between our thoughts, our actions, and the experiences that we reap in our lives.
That's a great clarification there for karma, because I know it's a word that's thrown around a lot out there in metaphysical circles. And the other interesting thing about karma is a lot of times we think that if we did something bad to somebody else, then the karma will be played out with that exact same person. And that's not really the case either. So it doesn't have to be that a tit for tat. Well, you were mean to me, and so something bad, is going to happen to you, whatever. Whoever is the best person to help us learn our karma is the person who will appear. So it's not always the same person, going back and forth. Karma kind of overlaps with this idea of role playing, where we hear a lot about, well, you're playing the role of the victim this lifetime, and I'm going to play the role of the martyr, and different things like that. And so that's kind of similar, where you want to understand what is your role with a particular person. And sometimes when we're not getting along with somebody in a relationship, or there's something that just seems to be off, a lot of times it means that you guys, the two people, are stuck in an old role that is not applicable to the current lifetime. So here's an example. Maybe in a past lifetime, a woman was the mom to her son, and they come back in this lifetime and they're girlfriend, boyfriend. But the woman is still in the role of mom and wants to baby the guy or take care of him in a motherly fashion. And so that's where you run into problems, because we get, we still identify with the old roles from the past life. And when you're with the person, it brings that lifetime up. And sometimes it's hard to release that pattern. Have you ever experienced that?
Yes, I have experienced that at different times. Not that specific example that you used, but I have had many friendships and other relationships in my life that had things that related back to a previous lifetime. For example, we do a past life crossing as well as a past life reading. And the difference between the two really is that a past life reading is a past lifetime related for you as the individual. And so it would relate to your specific karma. And we always ask for the most significant lifetime. So it isn't the most recent or the most famous lifetime that you had or the most entertaining. It's the most relevant to your learning where you are right now. But there's another variation of that, which is that you can actually have a lifetime come up that is shared between you and one other person. And that's called a past life crossing, or sometimes we call that a past life relationship reading. And so that actually gets into your personal karma as well, but also starts connecting that to the relationship karma that you share with another individual. Now, one thing I did want to mention too that isn't often talked about regarding karma is that karma is actually relieved through understanding. So as you learn about your karma and you understand how the mind is working, and that goes back to what I was referring to in terms of that cause and effect relationship between your mind and your experiences. And so that actually even is considered many times to be a universal law, that cause and effect relationship, that the thought sets things into motion, the thought leads to actions, the actions lead to experiences. And so all of that sets all of these things into motion that come back into your life. So as you learn how the mind works and you learn how to begin becoming a conscious, responsible creator of your life, then you actually relieve karma. So in some ways, you might consider karma being the unconscious effects of your thinking where it keeps coming back to you so that you can see the results of your thinking and the quality of your thoughts in your life coming back to you. But as we become conscious creators, then we are actually being more proactive and being a responsible creator in our lives, and also being responsible for our own evolution as a spiritual being. And so that actually relieves karma. We actually get into the driver's seat, and then a lot of exciting possibilities and things open up when we actually become conscious creators.
And I love that because with these past life relationship readings, you can really see what is the purpose that I have with this person. Because a lot of people want to figure out if they have some kind of purpose and how they can fulfill it so that they can finish and, then move on or develop that relationship even deeper. And so we choose everything in our life, and it begins with the family. We choose our family. And that's the first relationship that we have when we come into this world, is with family. And so the first key, I believe, is that we really need to understand what is the purpose with our family. Why did we choose this set of parents? That unlocks so much information for us. And of course, in the Discover Your Life Purpose Masterclass that I teach, we do talk about the purpose of our lives, and we do have a whole section on family where we do extensive work on trying to figure out, why we chose our mother, why we chose our father, what are the dynamics. It's really fascinating because what happens is, as most people have probably experienced or heard about, is that if we do not understand or fulfill the karma with our parents, we are going to find partners in life who repeat that pattern. We're going to find bosses at our jobs that repeat those family patterns. So it's just going to keep going on and on and on in this cycle. And the way out of that is to really work through it with your birth family, because that was really the first origination point of this lesson. And so again, you can also obtain a family reading. And those are amazing because it will go through and detail the relationship between all the family members, so you can get a bigger picture of your purpose with everybody in your family.
Now, the family reading I wanted to mention is between you and 4 other members of your family. It would be great if we could include more than 5 people in the reading, but the thing is that we found is that every person that you add to a reading increases the complexity of it exponentially. And so you can imagine with 2 people, you could say, well, it doubles it, but then you multiply upon that with each additional person that you add. And so it just becomes too complex, really, to be able to get an effective reading done. So we do limit that to 5 people within the immediate family. And so I guess you would have to choose who's going to be part of that reading if you have more than 5 people in your family. But it is a fascinating reading. I've done one with my family, and I've heard many others. And it's really interesting to see those roles and the significance of the past lifetime to the present lifetime, and how you can continue to build on those relationships. Now, one thing that I did want to comment on regarding understanding your karma is that I have found within myself and within the many, many students that I've taught, that as we build understandings and come to know how our mind is working and see the effects of that in our lives, that the intensity of our experiences begins to decrease. So like the example that Catherine was talking about earlier, where perhaps you have the same kind of person show up in a relationship and fulfill that role. It's a different name and face, but it's the same basic theme within the relationship. Let's say someone is being abused in a relationship. So if you don't really learn from that experience and learn how to speak up for yourself and maintain healthy boundaries for yourself and things like that, then that person may leave your life, but then another person comes in with that same theme, but it's even more intense. And that can actually continue for, several cycles and getting more and more intense. And what I've realized is that it is getting your attention. It is like a wake-up call. It's getting more and more intense so that you can no longer ignore it. But the same holds true going the other direction. if you start learning from that experience, you speak up for yourself, you maintain healthy boundaries, all of those things that we do to be a healthy, full functioning physical and spiritual being, then those experiences become less and less intense. And sometimes we might feel like, oh, I don't know why this is coming up again. I felt like I learned everything that I needed to learn before. Well, that's wishful thinking, because there's deeper and deeper levels that you can go. But the nice part is that as you learn from those experiences, they become less and less intense. And that's a sign that you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to mention too is, when we talk about purpose, a lot of people will say, well, isn't our purpose just to be love or express love? And that's interesting. I've thought about that a lot. And we already are love. That is our nature. So I don't really know that it would be correct to say our purpose is to love or be loved, because that's what we already are. So to me, a purpose is something that we develop and that we actually have to do. But I feel like love is just, that's like saying our purpose is to be energy. Well, we are already energetic beings. It's kind of like that idea that, you chip away at something and the beauty is, you have to chip away to see the beauty underneath. And I think it's that way with love, is that we already are that. And it's learning how to, not let other things get in the way or choose fear and other things that will crowd out the love. But the love is always there. We can't not be love. And again, we're energetic beings, we're spiritual beings. So our purpose isn't to be spiritual. We already are spiritual. So maybe it's more like a recognition or allowing that to come through. I'm not sure, but of course that plays a part in it. And when we look at relationships, well, is relationships just a way that we can be this loving entity that we are? That is also something I think that relationships are really great for, because they allow us just to be love. We don't have to do anything to make another person love us, right? If we just be ourselves, that should be enough. And so relationships really just help us learn to just be without having to jump through hoops.
I think that really speaks back to what you mentioned at the very beginning, that there are two primary components that we look at with life purpose. Because when people talk about life purpose, a lot of times they use such general terms or general thoughts about it that it makes it difficult to gain traction on what to really do about it. So there's the one aspect, and you'd mentioned this as gifts and talents. I often describe this as our life mission. And I believe this goes back to the idea that we are immortal spiritual beings. We are beings of light and energy ultimately. When you study physics and you get down to the quantum physical level, then we understand that all matter is really just energy. So we are beings of light and energy. We are expressing in a physical state within this dimension, but with the advances in physics, we are also coming to understand that our universe is multidimensional, and we're still trying to work out all the details on what that means, but everything keeps pointing to that the universe is multidimensional. And this is in agreement with metaphysics, because we talk about our consciousness being multidimensional as well. So it stands to reason that our consciousness would operate within these multiple dimensions. So when we look at that we were a being of energy before we came into this physical body, we made choices. We were deciding, what do I want to focus on during this life? So the mission component is, what do I want to accomplish? I want to go down there and I want to make a difference. What do I want to accomplish this lifetime? Now, we have found that usually what you want to accomplish is accentuating and utilizing your gifts and talents. And so it's something that you really know how to do well, and you want to offer that gift to the world. So that's like saying, what gift do I want to offer to the world? Now, the other aspect, because the universe is cyclical, so if you're giving something, you also need to receive in return. So what you're receiving is your learning. So you also came in with a primary idea of, what do I want to learn while I'm there? Now, this makes a lot of sense, because why would we come into this lifetime with no particular idea of what we wanted to do? We would make the best use of our time having some kind of an idea of what we want to accomplish and what we want to learn from the whole experience. And so we have found time and time again that is how we come into this life. Now, when we're born with a completely new physical body. Our brain basically is a blank slate. The neurons are forming for the first time. So it's understandable that we forget a lot of those things that we decided coming into this life and why it's so challenging for us to kind of reconnect with those. But there are tools and techniques available to us, things like meditation and intuitive breathing. There's a long list of techniques that are available to us, including the intuitive readings, the health readings, and the past life readings, even going to a reader or whatever you feel drawn to do. But we do have ways to clue in to what we originally wanted to do before we came into this life. And so it's up to each one of us. It's our responsibility to really explore that. But as we gain those answers and take steps, that's the other part, is once you have the answers, to do something about it. Because as we use that information and do something about it, then our life experiences and how our life changes after that is a testament to what it feels like when we are on our path, so to speak.
And along with that, as we do all those things, Patrick, I think we become more conscious. And I would definitely say that our life purpose involves becoming more conscious. So how do we do that? Well, through meditation, through reflection, through being in the present moment. And when we become more conscious, we become so much more clear about our purpose. So it really is an interesting combination that consciousness and purpose work hand in hand. In other words, the more conscious, part of our purpose is to become more conscious. And as we become more conscious, our purpose becomes more clear. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're these sentient beings. And so it really takes care of a lot of the issues and problems we think exist in the world, because most of the problems exist because we're just not conscious. If we were fully conscious and we understood, that we're these spiritual beings, we're eternal, we would not commit these acts of violence against other people. We would not, be harming the environment. We would not be, deceitful, lying, etc., doing things for our own gain, because we would realize that this life is just the blink of an eye. And the real eternity begins after we leave this physical body. And so what we do here is kind of like a rehearsal. So the more conscious we become as we inhabit this body, we don't even have to think about what we're doing. It becomes natural that we would not want to harm, other beings and so forth. And that is, this purpose of becoming more conscious.
Well, we have a few minutes here before the break, and we frequently are asked, so what kind of a career would be in alignment with my life purpose? So how would you say that career and life purpose are aligned?
Well, so first of all, our purpose is not a career. I mean, we live 20 years of our life usually before we have a career. So does that mean we had no purpose those 20 years? Of course not. So a career helps us by allowing it to be a vehicle for our gifts and our talents to come through. And also sometimes a career will challenge us to overcome some of our limitations. So when you do the life purpose work, for example, my course, the discoveryourlifepurpose.org website, will basically explain the process, but we go through 6 different paths. And the main thing is that we're unveiling our gifts. And then you look at all those and you say, what career would best be supported by my gifts and talents? What career could be the best vehicle for me to share my talents? So that's really what it amounts to. And then if you really want to challenge yourself, you'll pick a career that will stimulate some of your lessons. For example, if you're a shy person, you might pick a career that puts you out in the spotlight and so forces you to overcome your shyness. On the other hand, if you're really gifted with kids and you like kids, maybe then a career in teaching will best be supportive for you. So that's pretty much how it works. There's a lot of ways you can say it. Oh, I want to do my passions. Well, your passions are your gifts and talents. When we're sharing those, we're, in that passionate mode. So yes, it's following your passions. It's picking something that really is going to be a vehicle for you to express the true you.
In reality, we all want to get something out of what we do, right? So it all comes down to fulfillment. So when people start really exploring life purpose and asking about life purpose, it really comes down to that people are looking for more fulfillment in what they are doing in their lives. And career is a big part of our lives. We spend usually on average about 8 hours a day during the week. Most people average probably 40 hours a week. Some people, anywhere from 60 to 80 hours a week, even. So the career is a major part of our life and what we are doing. So if we don't find fulfillment in our career, then our life can seem very empty. And that's why exploring life purpose can become very important. Well, that's all we have right now. We are going to come back with Dan Millman after the break. So stick around. That's going to be very exciting. We're really looking forward to that. And please remember that Truth Frequency Radio is a listener-supported station, so you can go to our Spirits Journey page on tfrlive.com. And if you become a supporter of the station, 50% of your contribution goes to Spirits Journey to help us continue with this programming, and 50% goes to the station to help them continue as well. And as a gift, you will be receiving all of the archives of all the shows on TFR. So this is Spirits Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, being simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. See you on the other side. Welcome back from the break. We are very excited to introduce you to our very special guest, Dan Millman, in just a moment. You are listening to Spirit's Journey with Patrick and Catherine Andries, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. We are so excited to have another presenter that's going to be at the Reignite Your Light event in June at Fort Lauderdale, June 22nd and 23rd. So most of you probably already know everything about Dan Millman. He is amazing, but I'm just going to give a brief introduction. He is a former world champion athlete, university coach, martial arts instructor, and college professor. So after an extensive 20-year spiritual quest, Dan's teaching found its form as the Peaceful Warrior's Way, expressed fully in his books and lectures. Dan's 17 books, including Way of the Peaceful Warrior, have inspired and informed millions of readers in 29 languages worldwide. And the feature film Peaceful Warrior, starring Nick Nolte, was adapted from Dan's first book, based upon incidents from his life. Much of Dan's time is devoted to writing and speaking, and his keynotes, seminars, and workshops span the generations to influence men and women from all walks of life. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Catherine, and hello, Patrick.
Hi.
So Dan, let's dig in and talk about, you had an interesting 20-year spiritual quest that led to writing your books and your life beyond being an athlete. So can you tell us a little about what that journey was like for you?
Sure. And depending on one's perspective, you could say it was a 20-year quest or 20 lifetime quest or 200 lifetime.
I understand completely.
It was a long one in the beginning, who knows when. Well, yes, I'd be happy to share just a bit about that. I was an athlete. I discovered a love for just jumping up and down on the trampoline when I was about 10 years old, and who would guess it would have led to everything else. But I loved doing it, and I wasn't that good at it, but because of that love, I kept jumping and got pretty good at trampoline and then gymnastics, and eventually coached at Stanford University and went on to a faculty position at Oberlin College in Ohio. And at the beginning, I was focused on how we could develop more talent for sports, the ability to learn faster and easier and rise to higher levels. And from that beginning, And those explorations, my interest eventually expanded out of the gymnasium into everyday life. So I started asking bigger questions. How can we develop a certain talent for living, for skill sets and perspectives we don't really learn in school? And so I began to explore that with various mentors. I'm working on my 18th and probably final book, a memoir talking about, among other things, four primary mentors who represent very different facets of what we might call the spiritual journey and my lessons along the way. So I'm working on that now. So this is a timely conversation. Um, and ultimately, my research and studies and practices and experiences led to an approach to living with a peaceful heart, but a warrior spirit. And many people have resonated with that, both men and women, of course, pretty much equally. If those who show up to my various seminars and workshops are any indication, it really reaches across gender lines, age lines, reaching many people from all walks of life. So I'm happy to touch upon some points if it comes up. What do I mean by this approach to life, and how does it differ perhaps from some others? But as you know, several key elements are about living in the present moment and a different approach to this than we normally hear. But also, I've written several books on the topic of purpose. And this seems key for most people. We're all hardwired goal seekers. I mean, even a baby, my grandchildren, crawling across the floor when they were tiny, they weren't just doing it for exercise. They wanted something. They were heading for it. And so even when very young, we are goal seekers. In the Peaceful Warrior movie, there was a scene in which Dan's character is talking with his old mentor, Socrates, played by Nick Nolte in the film. And Dan has a realization, and the character says, Socrates, I realized it's the journey that makes us happy, not just the destination. Well, and that's wisdom, of course. It's a good reminder because most of our life is the journey. But without a destination in mind, there is no journey. We just wander around. So from our point A, we need a point B. Every human being needs a point B, whether it's for that day, that hour, or longer term. I would define success as making progress toward a meaningful goal. We seem to be most absorbed, most in the flow when we are moving toward a goal, something we want or need.
Wow. What do you think that is, that we get so focused on the destination, thinking that it's the end that is actually going to be where all the fulfillment is found?
Well, Patrick, when I was about 5 years old, maybe 4 years old, my sister was 3 years older than me. She was about seven, so she was streetwise. And we went to the circus, and she handed me something. It was this paper cone with a bunch of pink stuff at the top, and she said, Danny, this is cotton candy. And being the bright young lad I was, I took that pink stuff, threw it on the ground, and looked inside the cone for the candy. So I guess that's what happens to most of us. That's why I mentioned that the anecdote, true story, because um, most of us are looking for the cotton candy in the wrong place.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Well, one of my first introductions to you was when I discovered the book Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and I'm always interested in origin stories. If you could share maybe a little bit about the inspiration for that, how you came to be inspired with the concept of that book.
Like most people, when I was in college, high school or college, a 10-page paper was intimidating. Like, how am I going to write 10 pages on anything without padding?
Yeah.
But I started writing because as soon as I had my last college assignment, I realized no one was going to tell me what to write anymore. I could write whatever I wanted. And there
Hmm.
was something about improving my writing. I had to go through the muscular effort of putting something down on paper then. It was a typewriter days, not computers. And but then I could improve it. And I just loved improving it, saying, wow, this is better than it was. It's cleaner. So I began writing a series of gymnastics articles since I was a coach at the time. And over time, I started working on a series of articles. And one day I looked at this pile of papers and it was getting thicker. And I said, wow, that almost looks like, and a light bulb went on for the first time it ever occurred to me. I went, that looks like, could be a book manuscript. And at that point, I started rewriting and rewriting. I lost interest in doing that series of gymnastics articles, and I started writing about life's bigger picture, what where my interests carried me. And from the time I met that old guy in the gas station, I called Socrates, about 3 in the morning in 1966, December morning. From that time before I wrote the book, 14 years passed. And I had met other mentors who had a major influence in my life. And there was so much I wanted to share that I just wrote and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote. And it finally took shape. And in 1980, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior was published, based on experiences that I had that I really wanted to share. Not everybody is called to do that. Some people just learn and for their own edification and enjoy life, and that's that. But I love to share what I've learned. So I strove to write it in such a way that people might find some value in it. I had no idea. I had read Carlos Castaneda, many people remember him,
Hmm.
his first couple of books, and he was an evocative writer. I don't believe his stuff was true, but there was a lot of truth in it. You
Hmm.
know, Picasso said, art is a lie that helps us to see the truth. And he was very artful in his writing, an evocative writer. But yet I wanted to convey that you could learn wisdom anywhere. You didn't have to go to the desert, take peyote or mescaline. That's a path for some people, but
Hmm.
I wanted to show you could even learn from an old gas station attendant. The wisdom is everywhere. Um, in fact, you know that saying we've all heard many times: when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Hmm.
Well, the way I see it is, it's not about being deserving enough to have a Socrates enter your life and guide you up the path. It's more about when we're ready or really paying attention, the teacher appears everywhere.
Hmm.
And so that's what I evolved toward in my own life. So that's a longer answer than I'd intended, but
It's all right.
that's a fair one in terms of what inspired me. It wasn't one moment where a light bulb went on.
Well, yeah, that one thing that inspired me about that book was that I'm always inspired by writings that talk about the power of the mind, our ability to create in our life based on changing our thoughts. And that's been kind of like a central theme in my life is understanding the power of mind. Would you say that's a fair assessment of one of the central themes of the book?
You know, 25 years after I wrote Way of the Peaceful Warrior, after the movie came out, pretty much, I wrote another book called Wisdom of the Peaceful Warrior. It's a companion to my first book. And the reason I wrote it is because I felt many people, after seeing the movie, might misunderstand the teachings and some ideas, and they'd see them through their own filters and projections and associations and beliefs. And so I said, this book needs to be written now. And I clarify the teachings that I understood even better 25 years later. So it's, for me, it's not so much trying to manipulate the type of thoughts that we have. Thoughts happen to us, the discursive mind, the thoughts appear in our awareness. But, and of course, everything begins with a dream, with a thought, with an idea. In that sense, of course, everything begins with that before we draft it, before we bring it into reality. So in that sense, our thoughts do have major impact. But the emphasis of the way I teach, Patrick, is that action is the key, that our lives are shaped more by what we do. And if we look back on our own lives, no one has to believe me just because I say this. If we look back on our own lives, we might credit an initial thought or idea for something, but nothing happens unless we act on that.
Hmm.
Our thoughts are the map, but we have to make the journey to get where we're going. So I think thoughts are important, ideas, dreams, of course, but we have more control over what we actually do than what emotions pass through us or what thoughts appear in our awareness.
It's more like your actions speak louder than your words, kind of an idea.
Yeah.
And so, Dan, I love the fact that you're focused a lot on life purpose because that's one of my focuses in life. And so, of course, I have your book on my shelf. I've been reading it for and using it for years, The Life You Were Born to Live.
Mhm.
And so I wondered if you could share a little about how you see the numbers can guide us. And I would love for you to share what your life path number is and how you've used the strength of those numbers to guide you.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Catherine. I should mention that the topic I'm going to be speaking about at Reignite Your Life at that conference in June is focused on life purpose, and I'll be going in a bit more depth, of course, than we have time for. I will say that a rather unusual mentor, one of the mentors I met after I wrote Way of the Peaceful Warrior, he read the book, and when he was coming into my town, which was then in Northern California, um, his representative contacted me, and he said he'd like to meet me, and we ended up teaching some together. And he became a mentor of sorts as well, a very practical one. And he said, Dan, you're going to do people some good someday. And I didn't know what he was talking about. I'd mostly just coached gymnastics, maybe that was good, but he said, I'm going to do a reading for you. And I didn't know what that was exactly, but he sat me down and started telling me some information. And it amazed me. My life at the end of that hour, things I'd been stumbling over in the dark, hurdles that I hadn't clearly seen, strengths I had that I hadn't fully appreciated or used, became crystal clear. And I asked him if he was a psychic. How can you know all these things? He said, no, I am not a psychic, but I've been trained to know where to look. He referred to the Akashic record, that sort of thing. Some metaphysicians understand that, meaning where everything is imprinted. Somehow he was able to access that. Well, when he announced 6 months later, after I'd known him for a while, that he was going to be teaching an advanced training, um, and he was going to teach how to look, where to look for this information. And I said, you mean I can learn to do for other people what you did for me? He said, yes. Well, I was there. My wife Joy attended as well, and about 18 other people. But most of them, in a series of lectures, we all learned the secrets of this system. Now, I should address two elephants in the room. Maybe your audience is sympathetic to this whole idea, but many people go, the first elephant is, wait a minute, is this numerology? And it is. It's based on one's date of birth, and it is numerology, but I am not a numerologist. I never actually had much of an interest in that. The books I glanced at in bookstores on that topic seemed to me about 40% accurate, maybe, but it was a little confusing for me, and I just never gravitated toward it. But when he did this reading and then he revealed this system, it seemed to be more accurate than others I'd ever come across. And so I started doing readings based on 20 pages of notes. That's all I had, 20 small notebook pages. And I started doing readings for relatives and friends, anyone who would listen, and they were all really impressed. Soon I'd internalized the knowledge. And then I started doing readings professionally for over a 7-year period for many, many, many people. And finally, I decided it was time to do some trainings to train others because I could only do so much good, one person. So I trained other people in the helping professions in the system. And finally, about 8 years after I first learned it, I decided it was time to write The Life You Were Born to Live. It was a difficult process. Jack London said it takes hard writing to make easy reading.
So
So
true.
yeah, so I did hard writing, and the book came out, and it has found well over 1 million readers so far.
And also, I was intrigued because I was perusing your website and you talk about that we have 4 purposes in life. So I would love for you to share what those are.
I would be happy to. I've made a note of that, so I won't trail off and forget it. 4 purposes, but I do want to really just complete the response because I gave you a bit of history, but I wanted to say what drove me to write this book. My aims for it is not just self-knowledge, and it certainly brings that, but also compassion for oneself and other people. and looking up the life path of our parents, our children, our friends, our colleagues, we see that everyone has their own hurdles, their own mountain to climb, or at least mountain path to climb. There are 45 different life paths for people born since 1750 to the present. So that's why I wrote it, to help people have more knowledge and also more compassion for themselves and others. Now, to put the system in the life you were born to live, to put that into perspective, I wrote a book much more recently, which is a small book, but it's packed with information that gives more of a scope of the work I'm here to do. And the four purposes of life. Let me just say this. A friend of mine, while I was writing the book, said, Dan, I know the purpose of life. He said, it's love, learning to love. Whatever the question, love is the answer. And I said, that sounds really good to me. And that's a great purpose. And another friend said, well, hold on. But isn't the purpose awakening, realization, enlightenment? And I went, yeah, that sounds really good too. And another friend said, but that's all philosophy. He said, our real purpose as biological beings is to continue to reproduce and keep people on the planet. And I said, that sounds pretty good too. So I couldn't argue with any of those. But just as we divide the points on a compass into four primary directions and the days of the year into four primary seasons, by looking at our lives through the filter of four significant purposes, we get more clarity and structure in our life. It's not as chaotic. We start to understand what we're doing here and what we're here to do. So the four purposes in the book are learning life's lessons. And believe me, there's a whole lot more to that statement than just, yes, we learn from our life experience. We all know that already. But I no time to go into that now. The second purpose is the one we normally think about, our career and our calling, how they're different. So in some cases, they are combined, as in my case, but sometimes they're quite different. Our career is how we make an income. And that's a perfectly appropriate thing to do. And our calling is something we just love doing in our discretionary time. We're just drawn to it, like I was to trampoline, for example. The third purpose is the one that I write about in more detail in The Life You Were Born to Live, based on this life purpose system, based on one's date of birth. And it's finding your life path, which remains hidden to most people their whole life. And the fourth purpose, maybe the most important one of all. I paused on purpose there because you might be waiting. Well, what is it, Dan? But the fourth purpose, by the way, do you hear the sound effects in the background at all?
I heard the siren, yeah.
Yeah, this is Brooklyn, New York. I don't charge extra for the sound effects.
Punctuation for the climax here.
Exactly. So the fourth purpose is probably the most important one of all, which is finding our purpose in the present moment. Because that's always clear. Whether or not we know our cosmic purpose and all the complications thereof, we always know our purpose in the present moment. I know my purpose right now, sharing with you. You know your purpose. Your listeners know their purpose in this moment, unless they're multitasking, then it's purposes. But we always know that. And I go into much more about that in that short chapter in the book. What does it really mean to live in the present moment? How do you find that and live that purpose more effectively, and so on? But those are the four purposes of life, of which the third one I'll be talking about in more depth at the Reignite Your Light conference.
So we have about 4 minutes here left, and we talked about the four purposes of life, but you've also identified four paradoxes, which I think is kind of an interesting combination to go with that. So would you be able to share some of your insights about those four paradoxes?
I'd be happy to. Let me define paradox first. A paradox are two apparently opposite statements that are both true. And one quick example is from The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. He opens the book with a famous list of paradoxes, which are, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And he goes on to other pairs of opposites. And, we could argue either one on either side of that equation. I just taught a seminar last weekend where partners got together and argued both sides of that question. So that is the paradox. And when we get interested in spiritual dimensions, we start saying things like there are no accidents, and we start saying things like there's no such thing as time, all is the eternal present, and there's no death, and we are all one. And those are wonderful ideas, which are absolutely true at the transcendental level. But there are other truths at the conventional level we can't ignore either. At the conventional level, there are accidents. I've knocked over things because I wasn't paying attention, and so on. And time is a very handy measure of units. Tick, tick, tick. We know we have so much time right now for this sharing, and so on. So that's what I think you're referring to as the paradoxes. And I bring that up. If someone goes to my website, peacefulwarrior.com, on the splash page, they'll see a life purpose calculator. It's free, so people can go and put in their own date of birth and learn some interesting things. Also, they can click on my books and the Hidden School, and they'll see some more information about these paradoxes and how they work.
Wow, excellent. Well, I know you're going to be coming up, and you said June 22nd, 23rd at the Reignite Your Life event. So we are planning on being there. We're looking forward to seeing you there.
And Dan also, by the way, we didn't have time to get into this, but he's written a couple books for children, which I think is amazing, because we definitely got to get spirituality into the kids, right, Dan?
Well, yes and no. They're already spiritual. They're like little puppies. Just feed them, give them hugs, and get out of their way. That's my view of kids. I've had 3 of them and a bunch of grandkids too. So, but yes, the children's books, they seem to enjoy those. They introduce children in a very fun way. They're illustrated children's books, usually like 4 to 8-year-olds, at perfect age for these books.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah, so anyone can look them up at my website. All my books are listed.
Do you have any final thoughts here before we go today?
Gosh, I can't even pull one. Thought. What is that? Thought.
I did want to reemphasize, because I really liked your perspective, because I think sometimes in metaphysics people get the idea that you can just create a thought and then just sit around and wait for it to happen. And that's one thing we talk a lot about too in our classes, that it is important to create that clear thought, but then it's just as important to follow that up with action. And I think so many times we get sidetracked in our dreams and forget to take those steps that are so necessary. So thank you for
good point.
Bringing up that point.
As the Sufi sages say, trust in God or trust in Allah, but tie your camel.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing some time with us today, Dan. We really enjoyed having you on our show.
And
it's been my pleasure.
Yes, thanks, Dan. And we'll see you in Florida next month.
I'll look forward.
And once again, if you want to find out more about Dan Millman, you can go to peacefulwarrior.com. And we love having you with us. So please connect with us on Facebook at Spirits Journey Radio. Be sure to like our page so that we can be part of your life. And you can also study with us or get a reading with us at intuitiveschool.com. This has been Spirits Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, Simulcast Sound Oneness Talk Radio. I'm Patrick Andries.
And I'm Catherine. We'll see y'all next week.
Goodbye for now.